What's up, everybody? This is Timothy Rhyme, and welcome to Grown Man Sessions, where we empower men one story at a time. Today, I get to talk to a young man by the name of Juan Gaytan. He is from Southern California. He's the son of two immigrants. Along the way, he had faced a lot of adversity, white supremacy, racism, but he didn't let that stop him. He is now pursuing his PhD, and he's one smart cookie. He helps out with the program in San Diego, California. He's on the board of directors of Encuentros Leadership, which is a program that helps to empower young Latino males in the community. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with him because he has a lot of information to share. So let's get this thing going. Thanks for joining me today. How are you doing?
Doing good, Tim. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, man. I heard your story, and I was really inspired, man. I feel like, I see people that are born in with humble beginnings and are able to accomplish a lot. And I know, that it takes a lot to kind of stay on that path and to be dedicated and committed and just have that drive, man. So I would love to talk about that in more detail. So if you could, man, could you just give us some insight on where you were born and how the childhood was and stuff like that?
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to share my story. So I'm a SoCal boy, born and raised in San Diego pretty much my whole life. My parents are both from Mexico. My mom is from León, Guanajuato. My dad is from El Grullo, Jalisco. They both came to the States in their late teens, picked up whatever job they could. And then eventually they met, and then I was born. And they've always emphasized education. Whenever I present for high school classes, or any class, I guess, I always like to show them a picture that my parents snapped of me at the very first day of preschool. All those years ago. And I always say that's the day I started my educational journey, which, 25 some odd years later, I'm still on. I still haven't gotten off the education train. But yeah, that's kind of where it all started. And I have very vivid memories of them always being, a part of my education and always demanding the best, from the institutions, for them to provide the best education they could for me. In spite of, a lot of shame that I think a lot of times comes towards our community in those spaces.
Right. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. My mom is from Mexico, and she would tell me stories of when they first came to California in Sacramento, that they couldn't even speak Spanish because the people up there at the time would threaten them, would actually tell them that they were going to beat them up or just
Wow.
give them a really hard time. So I can't imagine trying to demand the people to treat my kid a certain way. Might not have gone too well all the time, but I mean, respect to your parents for fighting and advocating for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they definitely did what they could. I knew they understood that there were limitations to what they could do. And I still have this very vivid memory where I was in maybe second or third grade and I was doing my math homework and I didn't understand it. And I looked at my parents and I said, "Hey, could you help me with this?" And I remember this memory, you have these memories that just kind of stick in your head. And they looked at me and they said, "Mijo, like, we can't help you anymore." Because at that point it was beyond their level of education that they had received in Mexico. And so I think from then on, I kind of knew, like, okay, I think what's in the books, that's kind of up to me. And I think dealing with the admin and making sure that they're putting me in the right classes, that was kind of their domain. And I think kind of using that two-pronged approach, I think is kind of the way we went about it.
So how did you motivate yourself, I guess, throughout the years? Because at such a young age, you're thinking to yourself like, "Hey, I need to kind of be a leader in my own educational path, and try to figure things out." How did you just stay on that path, man? Like, how did you find that focus?
Yeah. I might have a somewhat non-conventional, I guess, perspective on this. I think I got very lucky. And I say that because growing up, I was pretty good at math. And that was kind of my specialty. And what was cool about it is that once I got put, because I initially started in bilingual education, and then my mom kind of recognized that I wasn't really learning a lot of English. And so she said, my son has to be put in English because he needs to learn English. So when I got switched to English, I struggled a lot with reading and writing, because it was kind of a 180 flip from one language to another. But math was something that, kind of transcended the language barrier. So I was able to still maintain pretty good grades regarding math. And so because of that, I got put into the GATE program, which is, I forget what it stands for, but it's supposed to be for like quote unquote gifted students or something like that. So I got put into that program. And then from being in that program, that led to me being put in honors classes, which then led to me to be put in AP classes. So I think very early on, I got put on this trajectory of the, quote unquote, the academically gifted students. And so I always say that's by chance, because I truly believe every student has the ability to do well academically. I think a lot of times educators and our education system don't tend to believe in certain students and their abilities, and so they kind of lowered their expectations of them. And I think I was able to work around that because I got put on this track very luckily, very early on. And so, yeah, I guess that's my.
Yeah, I understand what you mean by luck, but I do think that the individual deserves a lot of credit, because it's the work. You're doing the work. Luck didn't get you to pass the tests or do the studying or turning in your work on time or ignoring the distractions. So I understand what you mean by luck, but there's a lot of work that goes into that. So I think it's okay to give you that credit too.
Oh yeah, no, it was, I'm not saying I didn't do any work. There's definitely work involved. Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is more that the opportunity was open for me to be put in these spaces, and that put me on this trajectory. Yeah. And even despite of that, I still faced a lot of barriers in education, being in these, oftentimes the only Latino, the only Spanish speaking person in these honors and AP classes. I still felt a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of these things that your teachers say that are kind of sometimes backhanded compliments, or sometimes are implying of something else. I still had to face all of that stuff.
Well, talk about that. What do you mean by imposter syndrome for the people that don't know?
Yeah. So there's these stories that I like to share with the students that I work with, that I think are very emblematic of the topics that we try to touch on in our programs. Mm-hmm. And so one of the stories that I always bring up is in 7th grade, I was in an honors bio class, and we were taking a bio test. And me and my friend Joseph, who was next to me, he was white, and we both took it, the same bio test. And I got 100%, which, oh, great. Like I did well. Joseph also got 100%, and we were the only two people in the whole class that got 100%. Well, the next day, my teacher says, "Hey, everyone, we're going to rearrange our seating arrangement or whatever." And I got put at the very front of the class, in front of his desk. And so that to me sent the message of, I think one of y'all cheated, and I think it was Juan, which I didn't cheat. There was nothing to indicate that it was me or him. I think he just made a judgment call, and he picked the brown boy and put him in the front and claimed he was the cheater.
Right.
And so I like to share that as an example of like, look, we live in a society that already sends these messages to everybody about what to expect out of people that look like me and that look like the boys that I work with, right? Who are Latino men. And it comes out in these ways that maybe you might not realize it until years later, but it was always present. And that message that is sent to you, though not directly, the message is, you're not a 100% scoring looking person to me, right? And these are our educators. These are the people who are supposed to believe in us and our students. Right. And they have these biases that, impact students. And like I said, I'm 30 now, and I still remember this from years ago. And this is only one of the stories that I share with boys. I have plenty of stories that I share, but there are these stories that I think if you feel, if you get enough of these, and eventually you start believing the way that they see you, right? And I think for me, I'm still trying to figure out what it was about my upbringing that helped me, power through all that. I think part of that is definitely my parents who always, like I said, emphasize education and kind of always push me forward. But I also recognize that a lot of people aren't so fortunate that they don't have people that are going to advocate for them. And, the program that I'm a part of, Encuentros, I think the part of our biggest thing is for once, there's a program that specifically looks at Latino boys and says, hey, we believe in you, mijo, you can do this. And I think that that's one of the more powerful things that we try to convey to our students.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that there's not a level playing field, and you've just given a couple examples of how that can look. Do you think that there's a level playing field when it comes to opportunities, and when it comes to just I guess treatment along the way within education, and even outside of education?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely not. So I'm currently doing my dissertation research, and I've interviewed a number of Latino men about their experiences in education. And I can tell you that it's almost scary how you hear the same stories over and over again across district, across cities. The same things are happening to the same group of people over and over again, and I hear it from them. I've heard it from the boys that I've worked with. I've seen it myself in my life. It's very obvious that there is, these constructions of what Latino men particularly are supposed to be, that they are ever present in our society in every aspect of it. And of course, it's going to, permeate through every level of society. I think it's Assata Shakur who said that our schools are a reflection of the society that created them. Yep. And if our society is embedded with racism, if it is built on the foundation of white supremacy, then it is no surprise that our education system would reflect those same values and those same issues.
I don't understand why that is controversial, though, because it seems like it's a pretty common understanding amongst people of color. But there's even people of color now that'll, argue the other side. I mean, it's pretty perplexing to me, because I've seen it firsthand. I've heard a lot of stories within my family and outside of my family from perfect strangers. I mean, I've seen a lot of data. I took Chicano studies in high school or in college, and I learned a lot in that space as well. So, I mean, how does that become controversial? I know it's probably like a political thing. But it just seems like, what is the point? Because if the trajectory remains the same, people of color will be the majority sooner rather than later. So why not embrace it?
Well, we'll be the numeric majority. I think oftentimes talking about minority and majority, it's more associated with power. And though we are, people of color are growing as a numeric majority, that doesn't mean that the political, economic power is within our societies. I think that is something that people are starting to now come to terms with, or starting to understand. And I mean, our political landscape is changing a little bit. Whether or not it's all just bells and whistles, or if it actually means anything, that's still we'll still wait. We still don't know.
Yeah, sorry, man. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but it's just very. I'm actually a political junkie. I will watch like politics stuff like all the time, and it's intriguing to me. But back to you though, man. Having faced a lot of adversity, I'm assuming. What do you think was the biggest lesson that you've learned along the way to be able to move past it and become the man that you are now?
Oh man, it's taken a lot of work, a lot of personal work, a lot of reflection. And I think the biggest part of it is to look back at your life and see these things that oftentimes you maybe felt were barriers or were things that made you less than, and try to reimagine them as your strengths instead, right? The one thing that I've never said in education is that, for students that are bilingual, because I used to work at a preschool. And so you see that, the education system will spend years trying to get these students to forget their native language and drill English into them. But then come high school and college, all of a sudden you have to learn a second language. You know what I mean? And so I think the hypocrisy is so blatant there, right? That why not embrace these students at their bilingualism? Why not frame that in a way that shows strength and that shows diversity of thought? And why not talk about it in that way? Why are we always focused on ELL students as set for the deficit? Why don't we frame it instead that monolingual students are, the ones that struggle to adapt to a multilingual environment that is our world, which is growing to be multilingual, right?
Oh my
But
God,
not to
yeah.
say that we need to frame it that way. I would strongly advise against that. But I'm just saying that when you see it framed that way, all of a sudden you see these things, this hypocrisy, right? And
I
so I
was
think
in I was in France, I'd say, about 8 years ago, and I was there by myself. No, I was in Spain, and I was there by myself meeting a friend. And
mm-hmm,
I got off the airplane and I got onto the metro, and I was lost. I had no idea where I was going. I don't speak Spanish, and I was freaking out, right?
mm-hmm,
And so I'm like sitting there looking on my phone trying to figure out where I'm going, and some guy just says, "Hey, you do need help? You look like you're lost." And I was like, "Oh, thank God you speak English." And he's like a white looking guy,
mm-hmm,
but having had a conversation with him for about 30 minutes on the train ride, very nice guy. He spoke 4 languages,
mm-hmm,
and he told me that in Europe, he said it's very common that people speak like three,
mm-hmm.
4 languages
Yeah,
because they're so diverse over there, and they're so interconnected.
yeah.
And to have such a huge population of diverse communities like within our country, and to still like do what you're saying is like keeping kids monolingual for such a long amount of time in their childhood, and kind of force that upon them,
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't make any sense to me either.
I mean, honestly, when it comes down to it's going to be the buzzword, but it comes down to white supremacy, really, because what other reason would there be other than when you think that the English language is inherently the best, right? And again, I bring it back to our education system, when you look at it, well, why wouldn't you think that if all the classic novels of our entire world are in English, right? Now, I'm not saying that that's the case, but that's the way education frames it, right? All the
Right.
classic novels, we all know Shakespeare. We all have to learn about these things, which are, written in English. When you frame the whole world in that way, from that perspective, then of course you're going to inherently believe that English is the superior language. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a continuous problem. And yeah, always, you always hear stories of that, like, why don't you learn the language here? When in reality, there's no official language in this country. And also, I'd always want to ask someone that tells me I should speak English is, how do you say San Diego in English?
Right. Yeah. I mean, just look around the state. I mean, no matter where you go, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's either indigenous or it's Spanish, and
Right.
it's not very much European settlements on this side of the country.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm curious what you would tell a youngster that came from a similar background, but for whatever reason was thrown off his path and is thinking about possibly joining the gang life, or just making decisions that are gonna just hold them back a lot. What would you tell to somebody in that situation? Because from my own background, like I've seen it a lot as well.
Yeah. So I also have a background. My first master's is actually in counseling. So I was trained as a therapist. So I think my first thing I would do is instead of talking to this young man, I would listen to them. What do they have to say, right? I think we always frame the Latino men of color issues, as like we want to avoid them joining the gang life and all this stuff. They feel welcomed. They feel like they belong in these spaces. Instead of blaming them for why are you joining that, is why don't we have those spaces within our education system? Why don't they feel welcomed and wanted in schools? Yep. And I think that's what we're trying to do with our Encuentros program, is we're trying to make a space where these young men feel welcomed and wanted, that is embedded with these kind of layers of education and of completing your education and getting into higher ed, going to college, and not closing any doors for your future, kind of leaving it open to whatever you want to do.
I love that, man. I think that's great. I think it makes so much sense to meet the kid where they're at, as opposed to just telling them like, oh well, if you do this, then you're gonna mess up or whatever. Because I mean, we all make mistakes and we all take our own path. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I think there's not. I mean, from my own knowledge, I don't think there's as many programs that you're talking about, Encuentros.
Mhm.
that there should be. If there's anybody listening that wants to, maybe start something like that, like what would you tell them? Like how could they get something like that going? Like if they're in like a, maybe like a rural part of the country, but they're starting to, get an idea of like, well, we need something like that.
I'm a firm believer that where there's people, there's power. And we
Mm-hmm.
no individual built any organization themselves, though we like to spin the narratives that these grand things are done by individuals, right? We remember the Cesar Chavez's as the head of these movements, but in reality, the power was really with the people, right? With these masses of
Mm-hmm.
people. And so I would say that get connected, find someone who cares passionately about the same things you care about, and there will be a way. I think when you get enough people together that really care about something, I think you can't help but make some sort of movement. Make some splashes in the water. And so that's kind of how this organization started. A group of people just cared very deeply about this issue, and so what are we, like 17 odd years later? Here we are.
Yeah, and it serves a pretty large group of young males, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. I like I was talking to you before we started. I got to be a part of it, and just seeing the kids and seeing like you know the kinds of inspiration I guess you can offer them is pretty cool because
Mhm.
like I had never been a part of anything like that. I'm from Northern California, and we came all the way to Southern California to be a part of it. So
Oh
uh,
wow.
really special, man. Is there anything that you want to talk to us or tell us about Encuentros specifically that might be a fun fact or like something interesting that we might not know about?
Um, Fun fact about Encuentros. Well, funny enough, I was actually at the very first Encuentros event they ever hosted in 2003. I was there as a middle school student with my dad. I went to the very first conference that they had, and it's kind of a funny story that when you look at through all the pictures of Encuentros, it's almost like a find Waldo but find Juan in all the group photos, because I'm always somewhere there, because I've been involved with the program for so long. All the way now to I've been on the board of directors for some years. But I think that's kind of emblematic of what can happen when you surround yourself with a culture of people who believe in the capabilities of Latino men. And I think I've been surrounded. I've been in that culture for so long. I think I can't help but believe these things that they're telling me. And so I think I'd really love to share that experience with more young men. I think we need that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I think it's a really awesome program. I wish that we could replicate that like everywhere because it's a pretty important program that you guys are putting together.
Mhm.
Um, I always ask my guests if there's something that you would tell to like a youngster out there that's maybe going through some hard times and is just unsure of himself. Like, what kind of advice would you give them?
I would definitely say you are not alone, young man. There are people who care. There are people who believe in you. And sometimes, you want to believe that those people aren't around you. But I think if you're looking for the signs that affirm it, I think you will eventually find it. And then you do not underestimate people's inherent goodness to go out of the way and to do what they can for you. I think, Tim, you're an example of that. You came all the way from NorCal to come to this event because you believed in the mission, right? Every member on the board of this organization is a volunteer. So everything we have done has been entirely with our quote unquote free time, because we're just so passionate about it and we believe in it. And so there's people out there with incredible goodness in their hearts. And there are people who, won't turn you down. I think if there's a young man out there who's really looking for help and needs someone, there's people out there. I truly believe that.
I do too. And that's pretty much the underlying mission of this platform, Grown Man Sessions, is to just provide that type of inspiration or that type of resource. Every session that I've had had a guest that has, offered, whoever is listening, if they want to reach out, and just as use them as a resource. It's been a very cool experience to see that kind of kindness and that kind of charity, because I don't speak with people that I know personally, so it's for them to extend themselves that way has been pretty cool. So yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of people out there that care, and I'm hoping that we can get this message out there to somebody that is listening, is a fly on the wall, and says, okay, I'm not alone, and reaches out. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, I'm just curious what you think about how white supremacy plays into like how it it might affect how we see ourselves.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, I have stories for that too. I have stories for everything, Tim. Again, right? It's our society that we live in that sends these messages. So for me, again, I was in these honors AP class environments, and I was labeled as one of the good ones. I was labeled as not like the other ones, right? They didn't have to say what it was, but and so I kept getting this message fed to me that like, oh, you have to reject your Latino identity to enter this space, right? And that's why you are in this space, because you've rejected this identity. And yeah, it really does mess with you. And I mean, I'll admit that I had some very problematic beliefs growing up. I remember, I'm going to date myself here, but there was a Blockbuster by my high school. And I remember I would sometimes go there after school, see whatever latest, PS2 game was out or whatever.
Yeah.
Really dating myself. And I remember when I would go there, the person at the front would be like, oh, hey, you have to leave your backpack at the front. I'm like, okay, sure. Because, they don't want me to steal stuff. And then I remember I was going there once with my white friend, and I was taking my backpack off, and he's like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, like they don't let you walk around with your backpack in here. And then he's like, that's never been a thing with me. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so he just walked in. I'm just like, this guy's about to get us thrown out. But then I went with them and no one said anything. And I think now looking back at it, and obviously by your reaction, you have a certain framework about it. But me in my young age and hearing these messages, if you're one of the good ones, in my head, I said, well, this is their fault. The reason I'm being discriminated is because they're the ones who are stealing. They're the ones who are doing all these things. And that's why I have to suffer the consequences. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you internalize this racism yourself, and you start hating your own cultural identity in various ways, and it took years, growing up later and really coming to terms with what was actually going on there. But that's the way that, this kind of white supremacy kind of embeds itself in your mind, where you start believing that lie, right? That this certain culture is greater than, is holier than thou to all the others. And it's a shame, and that's only one of the stories I can share about that. But I think that I see that even in the boys that I work with, sometimes some of the messages that they'll send. And again, one of the examples that I have is working with our boys. We spend a week with them at a college campus, and they get to stay in the dorms and all this stuff. And I remember this one young man who, when he started, he would always say his last name with an Anglo inflection. And then by the end of the week, he was saying it, with this Spanish accent. And I was like, oh my God, like no one ever prompted him to do that, but something in him told him that now it's okay to say this the way it should be said.
Right.
And I think that more is a testament to the sort of cultural empowerment that happens through our programs.
Yeah, being proud of your heritage, being proud of your ethnicity, and
Absolutely.
Not feeling like you have to hide it.
Right.
Yeah, have you ever seen that movie with Boots Riley? What is it called? I forgot the name of it. It came out maybe like last year, and it's about a guy that works at a call center. He's this black guy.
Oh, Sorry to Bother You.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love that movie.
It kind of reminds me of that, of what you're saying.
Right. The whole movie is about adopting whiteness, right? To move up in the economic structure of this organization. I love that movie. I love symbolism. I love metaphors. That movie is fraught with all of that. I love that film.
Yeah. my wife laughs at me because I can do that. You know, I was taught that as well, that
Mm.
to be able to move up in the world and to be able to get certain jobs or to be able to qualify for certain things, like I had to speak a certain way, you
Hmm.
know, and even to this day, you know, like I'm 40 years old and I grew up in the hood, man, and that's just how I learned how to speak. You know, that's my tongue, but you know that wasn't acceptable. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Oh yeah.
So I understand what you're saying. Um, yeah, I appreciate you having this conversation with me, man. I think there's going to be a lot of people that can relate for one, and hopefully pick up something for two. But yeah, thank you for your time, Juan. It's been very nice speaking with you. Can you please just give the listeners a little bit of contact information for you and for Encuentros if they want to find out more about it?
Sure, absolutely. So as you mentioned, our organization is Encuentro Leadership. We are based in Southern California, San Diego area. For information, there is encuentrosleadership.org. There you can find our contact information. Feel free to shoot an email. I'm usually the one that responds to the contact us inquiries. We also have, the website can connect you to our Instagram and Twitter and Facebook pages. So if anybody's interested in anything, please feel free to reach out and join the cause.
Yeah, definitely. Great information. Like I said, I am very inspired by anybody that can come from humble beginnings and make something great about, with their life. But what I definitely tip my hat to you about is going from that and then, getting to where you're at, but then also reaching back and bringing other people like that look like you along. Because I think that gets lost in the shuffle as well sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's totally a big. Whenever I work with youth, that's always the message I try to send to them, and not only speak it, but walk it, and show them that like, hey man, like I'm back here and I'm trying to get y'all to where I've been to. If that's where you want to go, I'll help you in any way that I can, and really, just sending them that message to pass it forward.
Yeah, I had a conversation on it with another guy on here. He's a rapper named Clean, and he's from Oakland. And he said that he learned how to get out of the hood, but then he would come back to the hood and teach everybody else how to get out of the hood. So kind of similar ideology, I guess.
Mm.
But I appreciate the time, man. Like I said, please check out Encuentro's Leadership and reach out to Juan if you have any questions. I will put the contact information in the description. Man, this has been a really awesome conversation. I normally don't get a chance to speak with people of your background or your story. So this is a very cool episode for me. I'm like, my wheels are spinning right now. I could go on for like another hour, but I don't want to take up all your time.
Hey, if you ever want to do a marathon session, I'm down. This was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Same here. We'll have to do that. So you guys stay tuned for the marathon session. We're going to see how long we can go. All right. Well, I always end the session by saying that one person can change the world, but it's one person at a time, and that one person is you. If you guys have gotten anything from this episode, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and please drop us a comment on what you think and what are your thoughts on the things that we're speaking on. And as I always say, just make sure you reach out because like Juan said, you're not in this alone, and we're trying to build this community for other men to be able to like reach out and find other people that are going through similar struggles and just find resources. So the conversation doesn't have to end here. All right. But in the meantime, hope you guys have a good day. And Juan, thank you so much for your time, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.
Have a good one. Bye.
You too.